few months ago, Iggy comes home one day and brings a bottle of whiskey. It's a Hibiki. He got it from his good a friend of him for as a gift. And honestly, I really didn't like it because it just burns. I don't know why people you just say, your friends will say, "Hey, shot, come on, take a shot." So I've done it a few times. Drank it and a shot, a whole ounce of whiskey, and it just burns. It just burns, to and I pretend I liked it, but in reality, I really didn't like it. So I never bought whiskey before. You learn so much with Google. So one day I was curious and I said, "How do you drink whiskey? How do you enjoy whiskey properly?" And I ran into this YouTube channel called the Whiskey Tribe. It's called the Whiskey Tribe, and it says whiskey. It's a whiskey school. So I watched a few episodes, and I really, really got intrigued. What I learned from that site is the best whiskey is the whiskey that you enjoy drinking. I bought my very first bottle of whiskey. It's a Jameson. It's really not that expensive. It was like $20. And I followed the tips from the Whiskey Tribe. How to how to smell it, how to taste it, how to enjoy it, I even bought a Glencairn glass. It's for drinking your whiskey, and it will make it smell better and taste better. It's not in my head. It really does make a big difference. A good example is when I told Iggy that I bought a Jameson. He said, "Oh, that's so cheap. I hate that drink." Blah 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 blah. But when I showed him what I learned from the Whiskey Tribe on how to enjoy whiskey, he was very surprised that he enjoyed very inexpensive whiskey. So from the time I bought my first Jameson and watching the Whiskey Tribe, they recommended a few bottles that you should have in your collection. So I started not collecting, but buying and reading about whiskey. So now I'm gonna have to look back there because now I have 7 bottles. So I have a Jameson, I have a Hibiki whiskey because they said you gotta have a Scottish whiskey, an Irish whiskey, a Japanese whiskey. You gotta have American whiskey. I thought before I started to learn about the whiskey, I thought Scotch is for everything, even if it's from Ireland or from Japan. I thought that's called a Scotch. It's a drink. It's called a whiskey, and Scotch is just one type of whiskey. There is the Irish whiskey. There's a Japanese whiskey. There's a Canadian whiskey. And then there's American whiskey. And I didn't know that with American whiskey, it's broken down at least by 2 groups. One is called bourbon and the other one is called rye. From what I've been hearing from friends is the best the best whiskey is a single malt. I would have to agree, but you should enjoy the other whiskeys as well. So that way, when you drink your single malt, you will really appreciate the smoothness of a single malt. Now I have a Jameson, that's Irish. I have a Hibiki, that's Japanese. Now I have Redbreast, it's Irish. I have a Monkey Shoulder, it's blended, it's a blended Scotch. There's so much to learn about whiskey. There's single malt, there's blended. There are some snobs, whiskey snobs, all they want is just a single malt. But from my reading and my research, it doesn't really necessarily mean that single malt is the best. It doesn't necessarily mean that if it's the an older Scotch is better, 25, 50 years old. It doesn't really mean that it's better. Sometimes a 12-year-old Scotch is better than a 25. You just pay, I think you just pay more money for the older whiskey because it's rare. So that's what I learned from the Whiskey Tribe again. And I followed a few recommendations from the Whiskey Tribe. This is my favorite. It was my favorite whiskey. I'm going to tell you which one is my favorite now. This is a blended malt Scotch. So blended means it was distilled in, this is how I understand it, it was distilled in more than one distillery versus a single malt. It was only distilled in just one distillery. But there are a lot of good blended Scotch. So this one, I like this one. This one was recommended to me by my friend Peter. Said I gotta try this. So this is another good. This is an Irish one. Now this is my new favorite. This was given to me by my Mon. Mon gave this to me. It's called the Dalwhinnie. It's a Games of Thrones limited edition. This is so smooth. This is I find it sweet. I kind of like the sweeter whiskey versus the smoky one right now, but I'm sure my taste buds will change. So instead of me bringing a bottle at a time, I'm gonna show you my collection. Anyways, I am back. I had to cut my video. Did you know that Scotch is actually good for you in moderation? See, whiskey gets its name from, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Gaelic. Gaelic is a native language for Scotland, and it means, it's supposed to say Usge Beita. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but in English it means, whiskey means in English, water of life. And from my research, that there are 10 reasons why whiskey is good for you. It's supposed to be a weight loss because it doesn't have any carbs, no sugar. So it's good for you in moderation. I heard from a doctor that one drink a night, which is an ounce, is beneficial for you.